Hello, welcome to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. It's Dan Morgan, it's Ollie Connolly, and it's Mark Wakefield. Gents, hope you're both well. We are recording this the day after Liverpool's victory in the Champions League against Leipzig last 16. A nice relief for us all, I think, as Liverpool supporters, given the last few months. And it's a game in many senses, Mark, that Liverpool spring a few surprises. It's the sense that many have been calling for Fabinho in midfield and have been advocating for Fabinho in midfield. But to do it in this game, it felt like a bit of a risk from Jurgen Klopp, a bit of a gamble. And you can argue he's a manager now with, in many senses, nothing to lose. But the context of the game meant, in every sense, going into that second leg, he sort of had everything to lose in many senses, and to spring a centre-back pairing of Nat Phillips and Ozan Kabak in that game is interesting, but also to do it and have the result he gets and to get the benefits he gets and to look at the positives of the shape, for example. I think it's a real sort of statement from Jurgen Klopp that he might just be wedded for this from here until the rest of the season. I guess I want to start talking about centre-back in that sense. And yeah, do you think this will be a case of Kabak and Phillips from now until it goes completely wrong, or is there something else at play here that the manager's just managing game to game?
I'd say it's an interesting one. I mean, I think, me personally, like you mentioned, there are people calling for Fabinho to come back into midfield. I was one of them, but I didn't expect to see it in this game. Like you say, it was a gamble. The season was pretty much on the line with this game. If they went out of the Champions League, that's basically it for the season. Pretty much, there's not much else left to play for. But it was a gamble that paid off. And you could see straight away why Fabinho is the best number 6 DM arguably in the world. Certainly the Premier League, but probably in the world as well. It's an interesting one. Like you say, Kabak and Phillips, they weren't perfect against Leipzig, but like I think we said in our Facebook Live after the game, they worked the game out. The longer the game went on, they had a couple of shaky moments certainly at the start, but the longer it went on, you could see they grew into the game more. Obviously, they weren't without their faults, but this Leipzig side, they scored at least 2 goals a game the last half dozen games, whatever, since they played the first leg. They're no mugs here. They really are a very strong side, certainly going forward. And domestically in the league, we'll have to wait and see whether Klopp decides to go with that plan going forward. We saw against Fulham last week, when Fabinho came on the pitch for the last 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was, he was in midfield. Me personally, I'd love to see, anytime you see 2 centre-backs playing at centre-backs now, the bonus at the minute, given the season we've had, whether it's going to be Kabak and Phillips for the long run, we don't know. Obviously, we've still got Ben Davies. That's got to be factored into the equation at some point. What they're going to do with him. He's not been given a go at the minute. He's only been in the matchday squad for 2 league games this season. Obviously, he's had an injury as well. But it'll be interesting to see when he gets factored into the equation, if at all. But for me, fitness providing, I think Fabinho has to be in that midfield role now. I think the team works so well front to back with him in that role. Is so vital to it, and the longer he stays in that position, I just think that it provides hope for the season. We don't expect him to win the competition, the Champions League at all, but if they can go deep, obviously the financial impact and the confidence levels that will bring for hopefully into the league form and for next season should be massive.
I mean, what are the logistical choices heading into next season, Ollie? I mean, it's interesting to ponder that against Leipzig. There's possibly 3 players on the pitch who were on that given occasion first, second and third choice centre-backs, but every one of them might not be considered viable options next season. If we look at Fabinho as a midfielder now, and as Mark says, we sort of give him that priority as a 6. It's interesting when you look at then the rung of the ladder, if you like, as to who prioritises what, especially when you've got players coming back from injury and we're not sure how they will.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Last night was so positive. Fabinho was so good, and he has been unbelievable as a centre-back. You almost want to pencil him in now as the 4th option, but you need him long-term to just be a wild card as a break glass in case of emergency. If this happened again, that he's the 5th one up, not the 4th one up. And it's tough. I thought Kabak was quite bad last night. I think positionally he's a bit of a mess. You see him get turned around 3 or 4 different times, and he's one of those players where he's kind of juicing his numbers quite a bit. And then when you watch it, you see the decision making is just not there. He has a lot of moments where he just freezes, and he's paired with the guy Nat Phillips, who's kind of a bit reckless and will just jump out. And so that's a bit of a mess. And I think even for the rest of the season, you can't have this kind of situation where you're chopping and changing. If Fabinho's at the back 1 week because you're worried of the team's attacking prowess, and the next week you think they start their play in midfield, so you push him back up there. That's not going to help Phillips or Kabak. They need to kind of be settled, figure out each other's idiosyncrasies. Maybe you go, I stay. Maybe they can figure that partnership out together for the final 8, 9, 10 games of the season. Like you said, heading into next season, they need two. They need one who is genuinely, if not world class, you think maybe gets that level at some point. You have no idea what Joe Gomez is coming back. 2 devastating injuries at his age when so much of his game is built around recovery pace. You've got Virgil van Dijk coming back from a devastating knee injury, and you would imagine he's going to be at least 80-85% of the player he was, and that is more than good enough to put you back into league title contention. But again, he's getting closer to 30. You have no idea what that's going to do for next season and what that does in terms of shortening his career. Maybe he's fine for the next 2 years, but you no longer get the 4 or 5 years you thought maybe you would get of him aging gracefully. So you need 2, and I just don't think at this level Kabak can be one of those options. So that gives you probably 20 million to play with based on what they agreed to on the Kabak deal, plus whatever the owners put in their pockets, whether it's another 20, 40 million. So you really probably only have 60 million to try and find 2 players, that's not a lot of money, even in a COVID hit market. To find 2 guys you feel confident in as Premier League starters, 60 million isn't a ton.
I'll just play devil's advocate a little bit. I mean, I've been far from certain on Ozan Kabak. I actually think he does okay last night. I think he has one of his better games. I think there's a couple of examples where he actually covers Phillips quite well, and it is slightly encouraging that. I mean, just for example, he ends up a few times last night in the right back area, and he does that because I think he anticipates a bit of Phillips' own sort of inexperience at this level and a little bit of recklessness on his part. That Phillips can rightly be lauded today because he's done an amazing job for Liverpool in the past few months. But when that Phillips does something that's quite last ditch, it doesn't look as great as someone just being on the cover for him and sweeping up. And how many times have we seen Virgil van Dijk in the right back position, for example, over his Liverpool career? Never. But I think there's enough in Kabak last night to quietly put little bits of fires out over the pitch and bits in which I think you can actually look at him and say, okay, I actually took a few positives from it, even though I agree with you. I'm not certain at all he'll be a Liverpool player next season. One player that I think was a bit of a mess last night, to be honest with you, Mark, was Dayot Upamecano. And I think there's a few times where Liverpool should have punished him personally more. I think there's a lot of Upamecano, what he does, that is positive, and you can see why he's so well rated, and you can see why Bayern Munich have basically said to Leipzig, well, we're just going to take your flat sack bully from you, and we're going to sort of make us even better in the process. But there is a bit of a trick of the mind here, isn't it, that when we're Liverpool fans, screaming from the rooftops for Upamecano, you do have to sort of figure out what type of player you want based on your own strengths, because when you look at him last night, like I said, there's ways in which Liverpool absolutely pulled into bits, and if he came to the Premier League, it wouldn't surprise me whether that happens again. He's still got a long way to go for a player many were almost desperate for not even a few months back.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the hottest prospects as a centre-back probably across Europe. Pretty much every big name across Europe was linked with him, including Liverpool and Chelsea, I think, were as well. And like you say, you can see why there's obviously some moments there. It reminds me, this is probably a bit extreme, but there's a little bit of Van Dijk to him. He can play balls out from the back. He's got the pace to recover well. But like you say, Liverpool turned around a number of times and got him caught out. That might be, to be fair to him, that might be the way Leipzig play. Nagelsmann likes to play out from the back a bit more, take a few risks, certainly in their own box, which doesn't help things. But like you say, there's, in terms of looking for players like they want to bring in the summer, I agree with Ollie. Like, they need to look at possibly 2 in the summer, because the 3 centre backs that they've got at the moment Ben Davies, Ozan Kabak, and Nat Phillips, chances are neither of those three will be at the club at the start of next season because of Phillips out of contract, Kabak they might not bring in, and Davies, we don't know what the situation is going to be with him. So, like I say, the Gomez, you don't know what play you're going to get. Obviously, he's had very, very unfortunate with injuries in his career already, in his relatively young career. So we don't know how he's going to come back from that. Van Dijk, yeah, definitely aging, but we expect him to grow gracefully. But like I say, his that injury knocked a couple of years off of him at the top level. So these are all things that they don't know at this moment in time. So they've got to take a gamble of, do we go with bringing in two players? Because, like you say, it's not going to be very cheap to do that. And, they don't want to get into a situation again where they've got to be put Fabinho back there again because they've seen this season that that's just not feasible in the long term. The odd game when in a break glass situation, like you say, fair enough. But for the rest of the season, if they want to challenge for a title and the Champions League, which they will want to do next season, that's just not feasible in the long term.
That Upamecano situation is I think quite telling on Kabak. And again, I don't want to be negative, but that the Bundesliga's had a look at him now for 2 straight years as a key figure for a team that has been historically awful. They did not win a game for 18 months straight, and he was a key player. You had Bayern staring at him. You had Leipzig staring at him. He fits at 20 years old, the perfect profile of Leipzig. Go get him, and in 3 years' time, they sell him to Chelsea for 50 million quid. He fits it perfectly. They knew Upamecano was leaving at the end of the season. They could have gone and got him on January 1st, paying in cash rather than some kind of loan for option deal. Same with Bayern. They could have said, okay, we can get this lad for 20 million quid, or we can go and get Upamecano for what does it wind up being? I think it's 55 million euros. And they decided, no, we're both fine. And instead, he'll go to Liverpool and be the 4th choice centre-back from next season onwards. I do think that those two teams really close to him are quite telling on what his level is.
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, one thing I do want to ponder, Ollie, in terms of just the rest of this season, I would actually, if you offer me sort of a choice in what to do now, I'm fine with playing Fabinho in the 6 for the rest of the season for how long he's fit. But I would actually, when Henderson's back, be putting him in at centre half, and I'd be keeping Fabinho at 6. I'd basically make a decision that Henderson is now your 4th choice centre back from here on in until the rest of the season. And I say that because I think if you decide you've got Fabinho in the 6, I think if you then decide you've got Henderson as an 8, Wijnaldum, Milner, Thiago, Jones, so on and so forth, Keita, Chamberlain, I think there's a way in which you end up spoiled with options in midfield, and your compromise around centre half is one that really doesn't necessarily need to be made. And I get that there could be a general conversation now that's been going on with the fans within Kirby of, yeah, okay, we need to play the best number 6 in the world at number 6. That's fine. But for the rest of the season, when he's fit and when he's back in, we drop Henderson in and we probably put him next to Kabak and just say to Kabak, you do 7 out of 10 things next to this fella for the rest of the season, and we'll work around that as best we can.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly an argument for that. That is probably the way I think they'll wind up going when it gets to that crunch. We've spoken about it for a while, though. I still think that you should just have your best players in your best positions and try to figure the best out. I get what you're saying. If that kind of increases your margin for error, you kind of spread the goodness across a number of positions rather than being like, we're really weak at the back, but we're happy with our midfield setup and we're going to have to leave 3 really good ones on the bench. I fully understand that argument. It's hard for me to listen to Jurgen Klopp say this guy's the best defensive midfielder in the world and then say I'm just going to stick him at centre back in 5-6 weeks' time. And I think when you see the impact it has on Thiago more than anything, the numbers coming out of how much Thiago's had to run in this Liverpool team compared to when he was in the Bundesliga are quite damning. Given that he's playing in a 3, by the way, and often it takes on the shape of a 5 in that kind of midfield strata, he's running double the amount than he did in the Bundesliga. Now, part of that is just the league, it's the game state, it's the Liverpool's different style. But clearly they brought him in. They didn't bring him in and say, now try and become Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. They wanted to evolve to him. That was the idea. And he was a completely different player last night when it was kind of, you do Thiago things, let us worry about everything else. And I think if it's a case of saying our best midfield setup is these 3, probably Henderson, Fabinho, and Thiago, then I am much more comfortable saying, let's build the best block moving forward that we can do. Let's get our best 3 on the pitch up front, whether we think that's Firmino or Jota is now an open question. Let's build the best midfield 3 possible. We've got our 2 fullbacks, we've got our keeper, and we'll have to figure out the centre-back spot as we go.
Ollie, you're writing a piece today on the website about captaincy, which we talked about this morning, which, it made me sit up a little bit, I think. The fact that Wijnaldum was captain against Leipzig won't have raised many eyebrows. I mean, should it have?
I'm not sure. It made me feel really old. I was like, wow, I know that if I had picked the phone up to my dad last night 10 years ago, he'd be like, I can't believe it. The amount of disloyalty. He's not signed a contract. He's leaving in 3 months. How dare he be given the armband? What about Mo? And I think there's a real question on the Mo thing, as he publicly said he was upset about it last time, that he didn't get it ahead of Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, maybe he's more forgiving because it's Wijnaldum. Maybe it was a thank you for your service. Maybe it was the case, as I've written in the piece, of just saying, hey, look, you're still really important to us. We know you're probably leaving, but you're really valuable, and we need you the rest of the way. This is how much we respect you, how much we thank you for what you've done. Please just keep giving us everything that you've given us this season so far, until right the way through the run through. So there's a case to be made to that. But if I'm Trent and I'm looking saying, how come I got it against Midfield, but I didn't get it last night? Or particularly Salah saying, hang on a second, I'm the most important player at this football club, and I keep getting overlooked for this thing. So I'm behind Trent. Okay, he's a local boy, I kind of get it. And now I'm behind the lad who's leaving in 3 months. I would find that a bit of a strange one, and he said so publicly before.
Does captaincy matter anymore, Mark? In beyond the obvious, there's an obvious need for Liverpool to have a figurehead like Jordan Henderson for everything he does, both on and off the pitch, and all of the stuff that is often not referenced in terms of just sometimes taking players' media duties if they don't feel up to it and stuff like that. You need that bridge between players and coaches, and you need that captaincy figure who's trusted. And I get that in the sense of the sort of one club captain. I understand that, and I get why it's still a bit relevant, a la sort of Souness Keane. But in the same mould of the Souness Keane, roll your shorts up and get on with it type of mentality that they constantly, exhaustingly churn out on Sky every week. Is the concept of a captain something that we maybe have sort of gone past in football in many senses when you're getting towards sort of third and fourth choices?
I say it's an interesting one because, like I say, I mean, when Wijnaldum getting the armband last night, we just assumed that it's the fourth choice. Milner wasn't there, Henderson not there, Van Dijk's not there, so he's next in line. But like you say, he's leaving in 3 months. Is that a wise thing to do? But Klopp just sticks with his guns. He gave it Trent because he'd been at the club the longest when no one else was available against Midfield. But yeah, in terms of the idea of the captaincy, I mean, if we go back to last night, Wijnaldum might have been wearing the armband, but I thought Thiago was arguably the most vocal player, certainly on the pitch, definitely in midfield. You could see him pointing, telling him where his teammates to pass the ball, where to move. There was certainly plenty of times where Kabak or Phillips was out of position at the back, and he'd catch it at the corner of his eye and says, get back, do get back into position, don't get caught out. And that's what a captain does. And I think, in terms of this Liverpool team, obviously can't speak too much for the other teams, but this Liverpool team just have so many leaders across the pitch. When they're full strength, you've got Henderson there, Van Dijk, and then the front three. Salah's captain Egypt, Mane's captain Senegal. There's so many leaders across the pitch that Henderson's the figurehead, Henderson's the main guy, but they've got so many leaders across the pitch, across the squad, really, that from a Liverpool point of view, it doesn't really matter too much in that respect. But it's just so difficult to, like I say, it's just so difficult to try and work out why, a player who, like say, he's leaving in 3 months and he gets the armband against someone like, you say, Mo Salah, for example. Why he's not got the armband, maybe. But like I say, it's just this Liverpool team is so different to say so many other teams. Teams across the league, they've got rely on the one-man captain, but this Liverpool team have been built to make sure that if one man goes down, that they don't fall to bits, pretty much in that respect. And that four-man captain club, whatever you want to call it, main reason for that.
I don't think that vocal side of it matters. I think that's what you're getting at there, Dan. It's like, it's almost quite patronizing to think that like Mohamed Salah, who has the weight of a country on his back, has to be told like what to do by someone else. I don't think that kind of like leader of men warrior mentality that you're talking about really exists anymore. I don't think that they're that fussed, and I'm not that bothered about Gini Wijnaldum getting it. I don't think it's a disloyal thing. He's been an unbelievable servant for the club. He's been a massive part of the club era. If it's just like so he can frame it when he leaves the club, I'm cool with that. I find it interesting that Mohamed Salah vocally said he was a little put out by it, and that then it happened to him again with someone else. That is my only concern.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Steven Gerrard was never a vocal captain. Steven Gerrard led by example in terms of what he did on a football pitch. There are different ways. I wonder with the Wijnaldum thing, I mean, I don't think there's much to it at all, really. And that's where I ponder whether it's really even a big discussion at all to them in terms of the coaching staff when it gets down to sort of fourth and fifth choices, although it might be a big issue to the likes of Trent and Salah. But I think the Wijnaldum thing, as much as anything, will be a case of a reminder that despite the fact that he might be leaving in 3 months, he, as well as all of them, still have a job to do whenever they step on the pitch with Liverpool Football Club, and they still have a huge responsibility. And yeah, leaders take on different forms. We know that. You know, it's like I say. I don't think it is the concept of this guy is, you know, the most vocal in the team, or he's the most sort of Jamie Carragher-esque figure we can think of. So therefore, he is a natural choice for it. I think you're right, Mark, that Liverpool have a lot of leaders in different ways, and I would say ambassadors of themselves and their countries and their identities in different ways. And I think that in itself creates a team of leaders essentially who've gone on to achieve what they have. Let's just have a little mess around now between the three of us. Who's the most left field captain you can think of? Because I've got my answer, and I think I'd love to see it just for the Twitter meltdown.
Oh no, who's that gone?
Adrian.
No. Guys, you're for the vocalness.
Give it to Adrian for the honestly, he would be Paul Ince, Roy Keane, Graham Souness, absolute Terry Butcher rolled into one. Captain Leader Legends.
I'm all in.
Leader Legends.
I was going through these before because I even Wijnaldum in terms of like longevity and servitude and whatever you want to put it down, I'm not even sure he springs to mind as the first one when you've got Robertson in the team against Salah.
No, he's not.
Has he given so much more to the Klopp era than Mohamed Salah and Andy Robertson have? Those two are in the team, and it went in. And then there's the Trent thing where you can always just play the academy game and then move on with your afternoon. That's the part that jumped out.
Yeah, it is a strange one. I'll also throw Divock in there, but go ahead, who you having?
Left field. I think Mane. They should have given it to him and said, all right, are you having this then for the final 12 games of the year? What's going on?
I like it. I'm into it. Mark, who you having?
I think it's not so much left field. It's not as like quite striking as your two guys' does. I wouldn't mind giving it to Alisson. Maybe the odd game, he's quite shown that he's like very well liked among the squad. He's a leader. He's quite vocal, not so vocal in terms of speaking to his defender, but he leads by example. So not quite as striking as your Adrian shout, but
think about it. Just think, making Adrian captain would basically be the equivalent of getting Duncan Ferguson in at Liverpool. Imagine the seriousness he'd take. Imagine how sort of animated he'd be on the touchline. I reckon he'd go and stand behind Alisson in goal. I reckon he'd be like in front of the cop orchestrating when it's back full. I just think it'd be great. I'm bang into it. I think it'd be absolutely mental. But yeah, there's our bit of fun done. All right, let's pose another question then, Ollie, on the Salah thing that we touched on. Is Mo Salah really underappreciated by Liverpool?
No, I don't think so. I still think it's one of those fake controversies. There is an element of me where I'm starting to get worried with the captaincy thing when I see his interviews and it's like, I was really hurt by not being captain. I'm like, it's so easy to just say on Wednesday night, here's the armband, Mo. Now, whether that's caving to public comments or not, I understand. But I'm like, what can we do at this point to make sure that he doesn't leave for Real Madrid and say, you know what, bleep it. I want to go make 500 grand a week in Paris or in Madrid. And I'm like, let's name him a stand. Let's pre-build him a statue. If we can't give him the armband, can we do something for the man? Just so this nonsense storyline, he is beloved. He just isn't at the same level as Fowler, possibly Kenny. Kenny had the management thing. He had all he's done for the club off the pitch as well. He isn't at that level yet because the team he's in is amazing. The teams those players played in were largely dreadful, or they didn't win stuff. And so just having that person became our cup. It's like, well, we've got Torres, we've got Fowler, and he doesn't play in that kind of team. There's tons of world-class players all around him who are equally as important as his goals. So I do think he's perfectly appreciated. Now, if he feels slightly unappreciated, we must all do something to make sure he knows how appreciated we are. And I think we should rename a stand after him.
I'm not sure. And this is from a man who's just right now plumped for Adrian as captain of Liverpool. But I don't know whether there's a certain element that we know Salah's agent is a little bit devious at times, and we know he can be a little bit sinister in some of his actions towards manoeuvring things a certain way towards Salah. And I wonder whether the captaincy thing there was maybe a little bit of a prompt, because I don't buy that he's really bothered about it. I genuinely don't buy it. I don't buy that it bugs him that much that he's not fourth choice captain of Liverpool. I'm not sure, and I wonder whether, again, there's things going on there that we don't know. But I mean, Mark, where are you at? Do you think he's in any way underappreciated by Liverpool?
I can't speak for the club or the rest of the fan base from a personal point of view. I'd certainly not. He's arguably one of the best forwards, best players that I've seen certainly in my lifetime, and probably he'll go down in history as one of the best at the club. I mean, like Ollie said, he's absolutely right. The likes of Torres, Fowler, Owen, players like that, Gerrard as well. To some extent with those guys, they played in relatively poor teams, whereas Mo is just alongside fellow world-class players. He's got a front three there that for large parts have basically just set the world alight. The midfield is world-class, got a couple of best defenders, best goalkeepers. So, yeah, it's just, like I say, where this narrative of him being underappreciated by fans, by the club, where it comes from, I'm not too sure at all. But, yeah, from a personal point of view, I'd say there's absolutely no way of wanting to go anywhere. I won't go as far as say his name is stand after him. I think it's probably a bit much of a stretch at this stage. I think he probably has to win a few more league titles, maybe a Champions League for it to get to that point. But yeah, certainly I can only speak from my personal point of view about him being underappreciated. Absolutely not. World class player, one of the best around, one of the best that Liverpool have had certainly for a generation, and from hopefully he stays for much longer.
There's an element here where he's more underappreciated nationally and internationally, I think, where he thinks he should be in the discussion, and then part of it is pinned on Liverpool and their fan base, because Van Dijk gets an awful lot of the credit as the reason Liverpool were this winning machine. When they won the league title, they won the European Cup. Gerrard was in the Ballon d'Or discussion. Michael Owen won a Ballon d'Or before it was the new kind of Ballon d'Or, and yet Salah does not get into that discussion whilst being a part of this Liverpool thing. So I think it's almost more of a international perception. He's consistently winning golden boots at a clip that even those players that we've referenced there did not win. He's winning up Alan Shearer numbers at a time when, for a club where we've never had someone like that since really the glory days of Ian Rush. That's the last time someone was scoring at this kind of pace over 3, 4, 5 seasons. So I think it's more of a wider perception that then gets pegged onto the Liverpool fan base.
I wondered from the Liverpool thing, no, I wonder whether it's because we're not used to it. We had a chat the other day on one of our calls about numbers and the relevance of numbers to Liverpool. We always associate goal scorers as being number 9s or number 7s. We don't associate them with being number 11s. Mo Salah will go down as Liverpool's greatest ever number 11, I think. And I wonder whether he, in some ways, I wonder whether his best legacy will be in some ways making that number special to Liverpool. Because I think you're right, Ollie. I think if he came in as a centre forward and wore number 9 or number 7, a la Suarez, then I think in sort of Liverpool tradition, he would be much more revered. I think he'd be much more mysticised as a Liverpool player who's followed on from the likes of Dalglish, Rush, etc. But in many ways, he's such his own person. He's such his own player. He's such this absolute hybrid of a footballer that nobody could even contemplate. It's almost like he's this good. He has to tail off at some point. He can't maintain this level of incredible output from wearing number 11 and playing on the right. Like it doesn't compute as being normal. I think that's where it gets confused. I don't think he's underappreciated in any way. I think it's more the fact that we're only used to seeing this from centre forwards or people who wear certain numbers, and it doesn't follow the norms that we've had over the decades.
The only thing I would say is that even when we're planning stuff and we're writing stuff, there's kind of like the different eras of, once Alisson and Van Dijk arrived, that's like boxed off as its own individual thing. And then even in Jurgen Klopp's own comments, he calls Firmino the system. There just hasn't been that kind of he's just been droningly amazing the entire time. and it's never kind of like peaked or dipped in a sense where he's had kind of his Mo Salah moment. I mean, the goal at United and those kind of photos and what that looks like and how the crowd went, I think will always be his crowning like king moment. But he hasn't really had, I would say, what would be defined as his own little mini era within the team, because he's been there the whole time, and he was there when the centre-back partnership was terrible. Then Van Dijk, Alisson arrived, and suddenly they're winning everything. And so I think that might be where some of the discrepancy and kind of what the output versus what maybe the... I don't think it's a love thing either. Carragher always bongs on about whether he's beloved or not. I don't think it's that. I think it is a level of appreciation that we don't quite understand how difficult it is to score that many goals that consistently. Even Ronaldo didn't do that in the Premier League. Rooney didn't do that in the Premier League. These world-class players, it's only Shearer who had scored at this level for that kind of length of time, and he could keep doing it for 3-4 more years.
I mean, go on then, Mark. If we're not naming a stand after him, what are we doing? What should we do?
I don't know, retire the number 11. Is that too far? Is that too far to retire the number 11 shirt?
I'm gonna suggest something now. If Home Baked are listening, make a Salah pie. They might already do, I don't know, but that to me is the greatest homage you can have. There's a Rafa there, there's a Shankly, there's a Klopp. You'd be the first player to get one, I think. So that's my suggestion. But from us, we're going to just leave it there for this week. It's been a short and sharp one, but it's Saturday, it's the weekend, so we're mindful not to take up too much of your time. But be sure to head over to Liverpool.com because we've got tons of content there, which is great, and the site's there for all of you to browse around. So yeah, have a good weekend, everyone, and we'll speak to you soon and see you next week.